Yo, what is up guys? It is Bumfris, back with another episode of Entitled Parents. Today's episode is gonna be a banger and I know you're gonna love this one. I know you guys have been waiting for another episode for a while, so if we can get this video to 3,000 likes in the next 24 hours, I'll do another video tomorrow of choosing beggars. So once you've hit the like button, all you need to do is sit back, relax, and get annoyed at some entitled parents. So this story requires a lot of background to be understood, so please bear with me. Recently, my mother-in-law passed away. My wife's sister Lucy, who's in her 40s, has a mental handicap where she has the mentality and maturity of about a 9-year-old. She's lived with her mother her entire life and was understandably devastated by the loss. Because of her handicap, Lucy receives a social security disability check every month from the government in the amount of about $800. She and my mother-in-law had been renting an apartment using both of their incomes. However, with the loss of my mother-in-law's income, Lucy could no longer afford the apartment on her own. My mother-in-law and Lucy have a small dog, a chihuahua named Maria that they have had since it was born. Maria is now 12 years old and Lucy loves this little dog, and it really is the only thing she has left of her mother. My mother-in-law had taken care of Lucy for her whole life, to the point where Lucy never had to cook, clean, go grocery shopping, pay bills, make a budget, or do anything for herself. My mother-in-law's passing was not a surprise. She'd been sick for a while, so therefore, for the past year or so, Lucy had been receiving services from a state-sponsored program to help her learn life skills such as cooking and cleaning. This program also offers housing assistance, but it wasn't needed before this time. How the housing assistance works is that the GP buys or rents housing and then places clients in the house, charging the client significantly reduced rent, with the state welfare program making up the difference. After my mother-in-law's death, my wife became Lucy's power of attorney, allowing her to make financial and medical decisions for Lucy. My wife was able to get Lucy set up in GP housing at a cost to Lucy of $500 per month. This included all utilities, leaving Lucy $300 per month for internet, food, and anything else she needed. It's not ideal, but it's doable. However, she would be unable to keep the dog. The reason for this is the entitled mum, who we'll call Karen, because of course. Also living in the same GP housing as Lucy is Dottie. She's a female in her 20s. Dottie is also handicapped and she's non-verbal and walks with a walker. However, she seems very sweet, unlike her mother Karen. Dottie requires 24/7 support from caregivers, and Lucy also has caregivers coming on weekdays during the day to help her out. Maria ended up staying with one of her caregivers, Sophie, until a situation could be arranged where she and Lucy could live together. Okay, that's enough background, let's get to the entitlement. When my wife met with the GP representative and Karen to discuss Lucy moving into the house, Karen told everyone that dogs were not allowed because the landlord forbid it. The landlord she was referring to was not the GP, but the owner of the house that the GP was renting from. My wife asked if she could discuss this with the landlord directly, and Karen said, "No, I'm representing the landlord, so you'll just have to trust me." And yet, it gets worse. Even though Lucy is technically renting from the GP, Karen insisted that my wife sign a sublease stating that we were renting from Karen. The representative from the GP said to go ahead and sign it and that it would be fine. My guess is that since Karen is paying the GP, the document would be unenforceable and the GP rep just didn't want to deal with fighting Karen. And so, my wife signed it. Karen also wanted Lucy to pay the $500 monthly to her and she would give it to the GP. My wife, however, stood her ground on that one. There was no way that we were trusting this person with Lucy's money, and after much arguing, Karen finally agreed to let us pay the rent directly to the GP. Then the discussion went back to the dog. My wife asked if there was any way that Maria could live with Lucy. Karen said, "Of course not. My husband is allergic to dogs." So my wife said, "So that means if your husband came to see Dottie, he'd have a problem, right?" Karen replied, "No, my husband never comes to the house, but I do all the time, and I can't be bringing dog dander back home." Later, when my wife and I were at the house to sign the sublease, Karen mentioned that she just had to leave to pick up her other daughter's dog. What? Karen also tried to get security cameras installed in the house. They would cover the living room, the kitchen, and the dining room, basically all of the common areas. Because Dottie was non-verbal and couldn't tell Karen what was happening with her, she wanted to be able to observe what was going on in the house at any time. Nobody was okay with this, not Lucy, not my wife, not the caregivers, and not the GP representative. Some of Dottie's caregivers told us that Karen had asked for this on multiple occasions and she didn't like being told no. So, Lucy moved in without the dog. Sophie would drive her over to her house nearly every day to spend time with Maria. Every time Karen came to the house when Lucy was there, she told Lucy that she should just forget about the dog because she is never going to have Maria with her again. Everything having to do with Karen was starting to look a little fishy. So using the public records search, I was able to determine that the owner of the house was an 80-year-old woman who inherited the house from her parents when they died. Using the same search, I was able to learn that Karen owned 3 different properties that she rented out. I kind of got the impression that Karen was somehow trying to get the house from the owner, but we never figured out what the dynamic was all about. After living there for 3 months, my wife received a letter from the owner of the house. It was an eviction notice. Apparently, the owner had decided to sell the house and Lucy had 30 days to move out. The letter also stated that Karen has decided not to renew the lease. My wife called Karen, and as it turns out, Karen got a similar letter from the owner stating that Lucy had decided not to renew the lease. I couldn't help but laugh. It seems that whatever Karen was trying to pull over the owner got the last laugh. A few weeks later, Lucy moved into another GP house. This one was a bit more expensive, $600 per month, but it included internet which Lucy no longer has to pay for, so it's pretty much a wash. Also, another resident in the house has a dog, so after making sure that Maria and the other dog got along, Lucy has her dog back. A story like this one, more than anything, just strikes me as extremely bizarre. I don't know what the entitled mum in this story was truly up to, and I don't know if anyone ever will, but what I can say for certain is it sounds like she was up to no good. I mean, the subleasing thing in itself strikes me as very unusual and very suspicious, but for the rent to be exchanged to some kind of middleman being the Karen and then onto GP, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know where this took place, but I know in the US they have some pretty interesting laws around squatting and house ownership, and I wonder if the entitled mum found some really obscure outdated law that was trying to show that she had ownership of the house. Who knows, we may never know what it is, but she was definitely up to something. My mum wants to be a hairdresser. I have a place that I go to get my hair cut, and I've gone there so many times that they know what I normally get done and I barely have to tell them because they know. Today my mum kept nagging me and I only needed a trim. So against my better judgment, I agreed to let her trim my hair. As she was finishing up, my stepdad came out and started snickering. My mum then burst into laughter. I stood up and pulled off the cape and went to the mirror, and she has effed up my hair. It was bad. Long in some places, short in others. It was just really bad. I went back out there and they were laughing at me and mocking me. I knew what I had to do. I put on a hoodie and put my hood up and went to my normal hairdresser. I got in a chair and told him what happened and asked if he could make me look at least semi-decent. He fixed my hair as best he could and told me to come back when my hair grew out a little bit more and then he could fix it properly. I thanked him and paid him and went home. I got home and my mum yelled at me for ruining her work. I told her that she ruined my hair and I fixed it. She started yelling that I'm your mother, I should be allowed to cut my son's hair. I snapped and said to her, "Mum, you purposely screwed up my hair," and then laughed in my face about it. Why did you do it in the first place? Were you trying to sabotage my look so I won't be able to play in the band? I know you hate that I'm in my band, but I'm not quitting, so you can either support me in this or shut up about it. And I admittedly stormed to my room. She talked to my stepdad about it and probably blew the story out of proportion. So my stepdad came into my room and started to lecture me about respecting my mum. I was pissed off, so I told him, why should I respect her? She's done nothing to earn my respect. She treats me like garbage and I'm supposed to bow down? That's not gonna happen. My mum pushed past him and started to scream about how I'm such a problem child, and I answered with 5 simple words that shut her up. I said to her, "You decided to keep me." She opened her mouth a couple of times as if trying to figure out what to say, then silently walked out. My stepdad asked why I said that and I replied to him, "I'm tired of this. She complains and screams that I'm such a problem when she's the one that decided to keep me. If she wasn't ready for a baby, even after dad left, she had options, but she still decided to keep me. She's my mum. She's supposed to be supportive, but she can't even do that for me. I'm tired of her screaming at me for existing." My stepdad didn't have a good answer, so he just left. I went to the band's practice spot by myself and played my brains out to calm myself down. Then I came home and wrote this post. I have no idea where all of that came from, but I think it's just bottled up anger for her screaming at me. This just started as your average entitled parent story, and the longer the story went on, the darker and darker it got. Like in the first couple of paragraphs of this story, there is nowhere that you could tell me that you thought this was going to go down the path it did, but here we are 2 minutes later. To be completely honest with you though, this must have been a very difficult thing for the OP to go through, and don't get me wrong, it doesn't detract away from the fact that this mum is an entitled mum, but hearing those words come out of your son's mouth must have been some of the most hard-hitting words she's ever heard. Maybe this will be the point that the entitled mum realizes that she needs to change her ways, but from the track record of entitled parents, I don't like our chances. I live in an area with a lot of water. There's tons of places to kayak, canoe, jet ski, etc. So most people who live here own their own recreational boats or toys. My boyfriend and I recently got a barely used 2-person kayak at a garage sale for a steal, and we're eager to try it out. My friend doesn't really get out on the water too much, so she doesn't have her own boat, but she did want to tag along, so we went to a spot where you can rent or bring your own. Unbeknownst to us, her mother and youngest brother wanted to tag along. This wouldn't have bothered me if they weren't the most insufferable people on the planet. The rental spot has a bar, so by the time we got there, they were already pretty lit at 9 AM. We decided to forego drinking until after we ride and started to get our boat out on the water. I hop into the front seat and wait for my boyfriend to park the car and come back. My friend Kay, the entitled mum and her son come over to the boat launch, and the entitled mum is disappointed to see that they didn't have any 2-person kayaks left and that her son and her will have to use the singles or share a canoe. Seeing me floating a few feet away in a 2-person kayak set her off, and she yelled for me to get out and get this damn canoe. By that time, my boyfriend was wading through the water to get to me and politely offered that maybe if at the halfway mark to the lake, if she was too tired, that we could switch, but we wanted to use our own kayak. She demanded that because she was the adult in the group, we had to do what she says. We're 28 and she's in her 50s. My boyfriend laughed awkwardly and just hopped onto the back of the boat while the rental attendants looked annoyed as hell. Because we were only in like 2 feet of water at this point, she drunkenly charged through the water and grabbed my arms, trying to grab me out of the boat. Kay was already behind her, pulling her back and yelling at her to stop, while her son stood on the shore chugging the last of his beer. The attendants yelled for her to knock it off and waved over security while my boyfriend was already dragging her out of the water. He tossed her off to them with Kay apologizing over and over. As pissed off as I was fine seeing that crazy woman get thrown out of the park with her son. Kay had to leave with them since they couldn't drive home, or at least so we thought. We took off on the boat and came back a few hours later. The attendants told us that she started another fight in the parking lot, tried to come back inside the park to drink some more, and eventually was carted away in a police car after she started throwing rocks at people. You know, I really miss these old school entitled parent stories where the entitled parents think that they're entitled to somebody else's belongings just because they want it. I mean, you can't help but to laugh when you hear that the entitled mum decided that it was her right to take that kayak out because she was the adult of the group, despite every single person that was present being over the age of 25. It's one thing if they were 12 years old and you consider yourself to be the adult around a bunch of preteens, but as far as I see it, the day you turn 18, you're an adult. Anyway, that completely aside, from the story, it sounds like the entitled mum has a few bigger issues that she needs to deal with rather than focusing on a little kayak. A few years ago, my girlfriend and I were moving, and her mother helped with cleaning down the apartment we were moving from as the last thing we did before returning the keys. Having been at this for a long time, we decided to take a lunch break at a local pizza restaurant. We treated her mother for this, of course, since she was helping us. We were all exhausted from the work and were looking forward to a nice little time eating pizza and relaxing out on the patio of the restaurant. There were a couple of other families there, including a large American family. We're Norwegian and this happened in Norway. Their kids were absolutely mental, and their parents gave zero craps about them running around on the patio and screaming. We were not really up to this, as Norwegians are usually very polite to each other and try not to disturb anyone, and we really just wanted a relaxing time. Now, kids are kids, so I wouldn't blame them, but I turned around and spoke directly to them, not to be mean or anything, and said, "Hey kids, we're at a restaurant, shh." Yes, shushing them. They actually responded excellently to this and became quiet instantly. Parenting apparently works. This obviously infuriated their American mother, who went, "How dare you speak to my children?" I put on the thickest Norwegian English accent that I could and replied, "Well, you weren't speaking to them at all, so I had to do the job for you." The mother huffed and puffed something or other, but I didn't really care. They left in a fit after that, and everything became normal and relaxed again. Now, I can already see a story like this causing so much debate between people when it comes to parenting someone else's kid or trying to tell someone else's kid what to do, but I think you cross a line when you start to make direct orders at somebody else's children. In any case, I think telling someone else to just quieten down a little bit is polite and respectful, whether it's a child or whether it was the parents directly who are being too loud. If you're being a disturbance to other people, they're well within their rights just to let you know that you're being a little bit too loud and that they would appreciate it if you quieten down a little bit. I mean, look, like I said, in any case, this is going to split opinions, but as far as I see it, the OP didn't do anything wrong and they just wanted the kids to be quiet. That in my book is completely fine, and yeah, I think she's an entitled parent because she thinks she's entitled to have her kids do whatever they want at the expense of everyone else's experience. Alright everyone, that is going to be that for today's episode of Entitled Parents. I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for watching and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy the video, don't forget to smash that like button down below, and remember, if we can get this video to 3,000 likes in the next 24 hours, there'll be another episode of Choosing Beggars coming tomorrow. I'm not going to drag this outro out, but I just want to say thank you to everyone who's stuck around, everyone who's asking questions when the next video will be. As you guys know, it's been very difficult for me to post videos consistently lately, but I do have a few weeks off work coming up soon, and I can guarantee during those 3 weeks I'll be posting videos nearly every day. Anyway, enough of that. The gist is I appreciate all of you guys and I love you guys so much. But that is going to wrap up today's episode of Entitled Parents. I just want to say again, thank you so much for watching, and here's hoping I see you guys tomorrow for an incredible episode of Choosing Beggars. Bye.